I'm WFTV Channel 9 anchor and investigative reporter Daralene Jones, based here in Orlando, Florida. Many of you have followed my extensive reporting, Goliath Falls, which is a series of reports that focus on my exclusive interview with Chris Delgado, the former CEO of Goliath Ventures. It's about 7 hours total, recorded over several weeks, in the weeks after he was arrested and placed on home confinement. In May, just 4 days after our first story aired, we received a federal subpoena for that video of that interview, which is not protected by reporter privilege. We are posting the interview here on YouTube so that you can also see it. During my interview, Chris Delgado made a lot of accusations against some of the people who worked for Goliath Ventures and some high-profile people he was connected with in the Central Florida community. I have been in contact with attorneys representing some of those who Delgado made allegations against. So far, none of them have been charged with any crime. So without independent confirmation of the allegations, we here at Eyewitness News made the ethical journalistic decision not to name them at this time. It is important for you all to know that in journalism, we are held to a much higher standard than bloggers and social media enthusiasts who may post content on their platforms with a less stringent verification process. We will continue with our diligent reporting to verify the facts in this important ongoing federal case. And we will update this site and all of our WFTV platforms with the latest information as we do so. I think we should take a break.
All right.
What do you think?
Following your lead. I can talk for days.
It's just like, yeah, I thought so.
I was never detained.
Oh, so you just had to.
I checked in the U.S. Marshals. They took down my information. They didn't even take a mugshot. They took photos, but it's for my file. It's not a mugshot. I sat with this guy. He asked me a bunch of questions. You know, age, weight.
Oh, like doctor's office stuff.
Financial, how much debt do you have? How much is, you know, that kind of stuff. How many houses? And then he's like, how many, I was like, who's in my backyard?
Is there somebody back? Oh, yeah, there is somebody back there.
You know who it is?
No.
Oh, it's like a yard guy.
Yeah, he looks like some workers.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
And he's got the mic connected to that camera.
Oh, duh. That's not good. Why are there always people coming here?
You tell me that.
Like,
There's
oh
always,
my gosh.
There's never a day of
Were
just,
they landscapers?
No, they're installing fiber optic in the
Oh,
community.
it's the fiber optics people again. Those look like teenagers.
Yeah, that's what I was like, okay, you're different than the last guys that came. Yeah.
Do you have to let them do that? Because it's like community?
I have to because Spectrum's pulling out of this area.
Oh.
So you're kind of forced to do it or you don't have internet.
Oh.
Yeah.
Huh. Too much to just let people.
It's definitely, that's what I was telling Taya last night. Like, you know, it's nice to just kind of take a step back, you know, because if you were here during the normal operations, 5 to 10 people in my house, people in my bedrooms, I would take meetings in the shower. My assistants I would have to tell them to get the fuck out of my bathroom so I could take a shower. Because they would just walk in and be like, hey, we got a question. And I'm like, is it that important that you can't wait till I get dressed? It's like, it's like, what people don't realize is, yes, more money, more problems, but you also lose a lot of privacy. I got a house full of people and I gotta go take a shit. There's no hiding that,
Wow. I think somebody's knocking on the door. Well, now we can.
Hi, how are you?
Who is that?
In my house. He's not my friend. So. Yeah.
How long ago was that?
What was Mardi Gras?
Huh.
It was a weekend of Mardi Gras. Yeah. A couple weeks ago.
When you got to Orlando in 2019, where did you live originally?
Apopka. We rented a house in Apopka.
How did you start Goliath? Because you were doing consulting.
It was a culmination of things. I started consulting internationally. I was consulting in Dubai a lot. That's how my ties to Dubai got started. And started making a lot of money. And, we're talking $500,000 in a day, $150,000 in a day, for a good length of time. So I was making a lot of money, and I was doing a lot in the crypto space. And I was asking everyone, like, you're making all this money, you're buying all this crypto, what are you doing with it? Because you're not selling it. So what are you doing with it to make more money? And that's how I got introduced to liquidity pools and investing in funds that were very similar to Goliath. Goliath's name had changed because I always wanted the name. But a company in Tampa was having it, or had the name, and they were in the process of dissolving their company. So as soon as I had access to change the name, I did, from Gen Z to Goliath. So Goliath was still a consulting firm at that time. And then we wanted to get into the fund space. And we wanted to basically create our own liquidity pools and create our own fund. And it really started with the best and most pure intentions. I was doing very well in consulting, in investing. I had invested in a couple companies. One company made me a couple $1 million. These are crypto companies, so it's very quick and fast-paced money. And I had a lot of people that were just like, taking your kids to school, picking them up. At every practice, I never missed a practice, never missed a game. Was living the life, I guess, as you just say, but living the life in a very modest and conservative way when it, in my family, not what you see today. And people wanted that, people wanted to spend more time with their kids and be more of an engaged father, engaged husband. And I was living that life. And so when people were asking me, for the longest time, I was just referring them to another fund. It's like, I have my money here, go put your money there. And it's paying. It was paying like 8% a month. And it was working for the longest time. And so when people come to me, and I didn't want to handle people's money, because I knew all the government agencies you have to deal with, all that kind of stuff. I was like, I don't want to touch that. So just invest alongside of me and invest in this company. And it wasn't until one of my friends at the time, who eventually became my business partner, was like, why don't we just create Goliath its own fund? And I always tell people from the beginning, and I have a lot of people who can testify on my behalf, that I never wanted this. I never wanted employees. I never wanted to manage people's money. I never wanted this life. I was completely happy living quietly. You know, the life that I had, I was very happy. I was taking nice vacations. I was making passive income. I was having successful investments. And I had, you know, my business partner at the time at the time, and one of his close friends come to me. We had dinner one night at Ava, and they came to me and they said, we want to make this bigger than what it is. And that was how Goliath started.
How much were you making at the time, you all in your friend group? Were you all putting your money together?
No, we were all separated. You know, I was earning a referral fee, but it wasn't something I sought. You know, it was just part of the program. So they were just like, hey, if you have friends that want to invest, we're going to give you a 0.25% on their money. And I had gotten to the point, I think I was making maybe 30, 40,000 a month on just referral fees, not even my own money. So yeah, I was in the range of 50 to 75,000 a month, and straight passive income, not really doing much. And they all saw that, and they all started investing, and you know, and I didn't catch it at first. You know, obviously I did all the due diligence. I flew to Dubai. I met with these people. I took the big risk for a year to have my money with them. And my business partner, Nick, wanted a piece of the referral of people he brought in. But again, like I said, Goliath started with pure intentions. So in my mind, I just thought like, sure, you know, these are your friends. These are not thinking all the things that I had to go do to get to this point. I'm just like, sure, you know, you want to have a friend invest and I get paid the 10 grand on it, you can have it. So when we got to the bigger numbers, I ended up splitting the commissions with Nick, because those were his people, and I didn't see it as a business opportunity. It was just, you know, I wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to hang out with my kids. I wanted to take nice vacations, and I had that.
So you guys meet at Ava, you, Jason, Nick, who else is there? Just the three of you?
Cesar, yeah.
And you come up with this plan to start Goliath.
They come up with this plan.
What do they say to you?
So we sit at Ava, and they're like, we have an idea. And I already knew something was, like, I already knew they were up to some idea. And they both say that they want to basically start managing people's money. You know, Nick was like, I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of doctor friends. I have a lot of people that I can go to. And Jason was supposed to be the VP of sales. And so, you know, they would both work together and bring in money. And all I remember that night is I said, okay, because it was going to be under the Goliath umbrella. So I said, okay, but I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to deal with investors. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to see them. They have questions. They have anything. You guys deal with it. My only job was to make sure that the commissions between myself, Jay, and Nick were split. So when that report came in and the payment came in, I would sit down with them and say, okay, who gets what?
How was it split?
3 ways. But, you know, in the beginning, it was like 3 equal ways. And then it was like Nick's doing more work, so he should get an extra. And or Jay's doing more work, you know. But they would handle that. I would just ask Nick and Jay, who am I sending what and how much, you know? And then I'd take my piece. And it was really just more like a royalty because they're using my name. And we thought we would end the year with $1 million of AUM. And we ended the year with over 5 million in a 2-3 month process. So that's when I knew, like, we have something.
So in a matter of a few months, you all made a profit of $5 million. How did that happen?
No, we didn't make a profit of 5 million. We had brought in 5 million. Or
Oh,
close to
from
5 million.
investors.
From investors, yeah.
So in a period of a few months, however many people gave you $5 million?
Yeah.
Did you have a license to manage it? Like, how was the...
No, I mean, so that's where, that's where we've always sought counsel. And we were told, this is friends and family. You guys are just, we tell them the story. We were having dinner. We came with the idea. We wanted to invest alongside each other. We had a vehicle. It was working. And we wanted to bring our friends and our family into it. That was it. And I would always tell people, like, all I wanted to do was just take vacations with my friends. And my friends are always working or doing this or doing that. So I found this as a vehicle to free up their time so we could all just hang out. And it was working for the longest time.
What did you say to people to convince them to give you their money?
I didn't say anything. I've never solicited a dollar into Goliath. I think that's the biggest misconception that's out there is I have never had an investment call with investors. Now, I have been asked to go to dinners. Nick is having a dinner with doctors or people, and he's asked me, because I'm CEO of the company, to come in and sit. But I've had the same message for everyone. I'm not going to sit here and pitch you on my company. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how you need to give your money to my company. You're either comfortable or you're not. And if you're not comfortable, and I have always said this to any person I've sat with, my goal is for you to sleep at night. So if you're going to give me money and you can't sleep at night, it's going to affect your marriage, it's going to affect your kids, it's going to affect your whole life. Don't give me your money. That was my pitch.
So what was said at these dinners, these meetings, that gave people a level of comfort to give you? I mean, because the baseline was $100,000.
Yeah.
So what was said to convince people to hand over that kind of money?
I think there was a lot of conversations happening. Again, I told you the conversations that I had and the points that I would make. I would never go to a dinner to pitch people. I always had the approach that I'm there as a CEO. They can feel my presence, but I'm not there to sell you why you should give my company money. So I can only sit here and speculate that they were promising things that we probably couldn't deliver on.
Do you think your presence at these meetings, at the dinners, pressured people or made them feel more comfortable to give the money?
I think it was both. At the time, Goliath was like the cool kids club. If you lived in Orlando or if you lived in Windermere or Dr. Phillips and you weren't part of Goliath, it was weird. People looked at you weird and were like, why doesn't Chris like you? Why didn't he allow you to invest in his fund? Why? It was such a weird power dynamic play that was happening. I'd be seen with this person and then that would get leaked out like, oh, Chris is having dinner with this person, and they're very influential. Chris was on a trip with this person, or Chris went, here with this person, or they got to go with Chris. And it was always that you got to go with Chris. Chris liked you. Chris allowed you to invest in his company, that kind of thing. So I think it was both. I think it was my presence that pressured people because I was there and didn't say much. And then it was also a level of comfort of knowing that the who's who of Orlando are essentially in my pocket.
In the beginning, like when you had the $5 million, what happened to that money? Was it ever invested?
It was. So, like I said, Goliath always started with pure intentions. we were using the fund. We were basically white labeling a fund. So we would use a fund to send money to. We would label it as Goliath's fund. That fund would pay us out, and then we would pay out investors. And that worked for quite some time.
How long?
3-4 months. But in the process of that, we were also developing our own liquidity pools. And I personally have given millions of dollars, $5-6 million into these development teams to build a working system. The problem that we ran into was when that fund froze, we already had this big name. We already had all this trust. We already had people sending us in millions of dollars. And we were in the middle of development of our own product. So we had enough capital to carry us, to do distributions and to carry us. And we had enough capital coming in. So we were just trying to buy time to get our product working.
So how much was invested in the beginning?
In the beginning of what?
Goliath. When you got money from the investors, how much of their money was invested?
All of it. Yeah. Yeah. No, it was all getting funneled to another fund. And we were just labeling it Goliath. We were, white labeling it Goliath.
What were the early returns?
We were so, going back to, we were just giving people 8% because that's what the fund was paying out. And then we were splitting the referral fee. And so, again, we weren't building Goliath to be a business. It was just friends and family investing alongside each other. And our incentive was we were splitting the commission. It wasn't until later down the road where it's like, okay, we can't, first off, our product isn't launched. Our one fund is frozen. And we can't offer 8%.
Explain to people, because I want to get back to that, but explain to people when you say like the fund is frozen, what does that mean?
So what we were told was that the fund that we're using and calling Goliath, that the wallets were all frozen. So the money couldn't move. So the money couldn't move into liquidity pools. The money couldn't move into our wallets. So everything was kind of just like, when the bank suspects fraud, mm-hmm. and they freeze your accounts. You can see the money, but you can't move it anywhere. You can't move it outside the bank. You can't go withdraw cash. That's what happened to us. Everything just kind of stopped.
What happened? Why? What was the reason?
From what we were told, that because the fund was using personal wallets, that when they hit over, 200 million, their wallets went under an audit and they got frozen because you can't use personal wallets to manage that much amount of money on Binance, which is what pushed Goliath to have institutional wallets, which is why we went through the process to get institutional wallets with Coinbase, because we didn't want that. We didn't want that problem later down the road. So that's what we were told. Whether that's true or not, and whether that fund was an actual Ponzi and then collapsed because of that, we honestly really don't know. And the reason we don't know is because we've had people from Binance say, yes, there's a significant amount of money in these wallets and they are frozen. And we've had attorneys talk to Binance attorneys and say, there's money in these wallets, but they're frozen. So we really don't know. Was MLP, my liquidity partner, an actual Ponzi scheme? Or was it an actual true venture? And the excuse that they gave us was legitimate.
So you're growing. You're still taking in investors. But the fund is frozen, so you can't pay out anything.
The fund is frozen that we're white labeling, but we're still developing ours. And for us, what we were being told, what Nick and I were being told was that our product would be available in March of, I think that was 23. So January, our white label fund gets frozen, so we have 2 months to carry. And we knew we had enough capital to carry those 2 months, and then our fund would be live in March. But like anything else, in life, things don't always go to plan. So it just kept getting delayed and delayed and delayed. But in these delays, we are now a rocket ship.
And you continue to take investors.
We didn't have any choice.
Why didn't you just say no?
I think it's easy for someone to sit on the outside. And yes, that's the most logical answer. To freeze everything, to stop, to not take. It goes as saying, there's been a lot of people in my position. 99% of those people didn't stop. And you have to really ask yourself, why? Like, you can sit on the outside and make a logic decision and say, you should have just stopped and not took any money in. I've heard that 1,000 times. But when you're in the middle of it, and you believe in this product, you're developing it, you've invested millions of dollars already, you have people coming up to you, how grateful they are, how their lives have changed. You're doing everything that you can to keep this dream alive. The minute you stop that, everything else halts. So it's not about greed at this point. It's not about... It's about protecting what we had just built and protecting the sacred relationships we built from that and the trust we have. And so we couldn't freeze it. We had so much inflow coming in, and we knew that we had the cash to cover, and we knew once our product launched that we could have right or wrong and no one would have ever known.
The very definition of what you just described is a Ponzi scheme.
But I also think a Ponzi scheme has intent. Knowingly raising money, knowingly building it as a fraud. That's what everyone's missing here. I didn't build Goliath to be a Ponzi scheme. Didn't build Goliath to be a fraud. We were changing people's lives. We were using a vehicle that was working. We were seeing the relief it was bringing. And like any business, we hit a roadblock. And we dumped millions of dollars into development, into fixing the roadblock, into trying to get us back on track. So yes, I agree with you in the definition, but the intent was completely different than how other people had operated.
So you get to a point where it's like, gosh, it's March. Like, it's still frozen. What do you do then?
Nick and I are going back and forth to Dubai. We're flying there, emergency meetings, we're meeting with our teams, we're meeting with the thing, and we're getting reassurances, we're testing, our early beta tests that happened in late February, early March, we're doing 30-40% in returns. So you sit there and you're testing and you're seeing 30-40%. So in our mind, we're thinking, if we hold the commissions part of it and just pay people what they're owed, the cash flow that we can get back, we're good. We're saved. and no one knew that there was this roadblock. The problem was that it just kept getting delayed. And it was March, then it was April, then it was first week of June. Well, the problem is everyone in Dubai leaves for the summer. So everyone left in the summer to Germany and to, wherever else they went. So that June deadline now got pushed to September. And so we're just pressing on our team to get this live, and even, and with that you have the market. In February 23, market was good. We're getting good returns. We're getting, in our beta testing, we're getting 30-40% returns. But then you have the market that's bad in the summer, and you're only getting 3-4% returns. Or you're getting, 1. And so the problem we had was our development team knew how good the returns could be, and they were aiming for that every single time. Instead of just getting it launched and then dealing with the returns that we could get month to month. That was the problem we were having. And so it just got delayed. But as the delays happened, we were getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Because you're still taking money.
Yeah.
So we're in September 2023 now. You still have there is no real fund developed. Why didn't you just cut bait then? Because now you've got months that have gone by. Nothing is happening. Wouldn't it have just been better to just say, look, this isn't working. We've got to cut bait?
Again, it's hard to do that in the moment. Yes, the logical answer is just cut our losses, come out, tell our investors it's done.
Did you get used to the lifestyle? Did you get used to the money? Were you really convinced that something would come of this? Which of those buckets are we?
There, at that time, there wasn't really a lifestyle change. My wife and I had split. I had moved out. I was living in a modest home. The year before, I had bought a sports car and bought a new Corvette. And that was paid for. So there wasn't really a lifestyle to be chasing.
Because you had money already.
Yeah. I was already successful. I already had money. So it wasn't the lifestyle. It was the impact we were having in people's lives. And you're looking at an individual who has conquered so many different challenges in their life, so many trials and tribulations, and has never accepted failure as an answer. So I wasn't going to allow this to fail. And I knew if we had stopped, not only was I going to fail all our investors, but I was going to be the biggest failure in Orlando. And I wasn't going to let that happen. And so we pressed.
Take me to early 2024. Because it's still locked.
Yeah. Early 2024, I think we just passed over 100 million.
With how many investors?
I think at the time we were we were shy of 100 million. We had a Christmas party, and we had about 110 investors show up to the Christmas party. Yeah, we were I think 65, 70 million AUM of end of 2023. And we had a nice Christmas party. Not what they are today, but it was nice. Nice restaurant, nice wine, nice champagne. Everyone thinks if you eat crap at Christmas, it's kind of funny how you learn these things. You learn these things as kids. You know, you have a shrimp cocktail and you eat king crab legs. So that, you know, life is good. So yeah, early 24, we're back in Dubai, and we're really pressing. The problem we had now at the time was what we had originally wanted to build was evolving and changing. The people we had entrusted with the development of these projects couldn't focus enough to get these projects off the ground. There was always a new idea, a new venture, a new this, a new that, and it was driving us crazy.
So how did it change? Like, what are we talking about now in terms of a project?
So we went from crypto liquidity pools to now a tech platform that promotes projects called Seed Hunter. And they needed, I think, $3 million or $2 million into that. And for us, we took the approach was this is our lifeline. So we need to keep these guys happy because we need our fund operating. So of course we invested in the Seed Hunter. You know, I think it was like $2-3 million we ended up investing. So then that gets developed, or that's getting in development. But then I remember having this conversation vividly. Then the whole model of the plan changes. So instead of just now providing crypto liquidity, now we have they wanted to build a fund that provides crypto liquidity, that provides trading, that provides a tech platform for projects, that provides Bitcoin mining. This is how we got into Bitcoin mining. We, contrary to what people say on there, we own containers in Dubai that mine crypto or that mine Bitcoin. I own 30% of Maze Mining by the amount of money we've invested into these companies. So it's not that we didn't have an effort to try to get these things up and running. It's just we had the wrong operators. And to that aspect, because now we're going into a regulated fund, we have to now pay as a regulated fund, which means you can only get a distribution every quarter, which means your money's locked up for a year. So the model now wasn't working for us because we can't now switch people that have been with us the last year and a half to say your money's now locked and you're going to a quarterly payout.
Did you ever notify any of the investors that things were shifting, that things were changing?
We had told them that things would change over time, that we would change models and structures. But what's that saying? You're a product of your own demise, or what's that? I had now allowed people to get close to me. I had now built relationships with our investors. And it was the worst thing that I could ever have done. Because the minute I wanted to change things that would better for the investors, was better for the company, it was never looked in the light that Chris is making these decisions for the betterment of the company and our money. Their thought process was, what's wrong with the company? Why does the company, like, the biggest change of the percentages wasn't because the fund that we were building couldn't produce those. The biggest change why we went from 6, 7, 8 to now 3 and 4 is because the fund got too big, where you would talk to one person, he offer you 5, and you talk to the other person, he offer you 6. You know, it was like, it became now a battle within the company of who's going to get the best deal. And so I had to put my foot down and say, this is madness. You guys are a team. You guys are working together. Why are you guys causing, once you're making us look like fools out on the streets, but second, you're now fighting with your team over a couple bucks. So we had to structure it to say, okay, it's capped. This is what you can offer. These guys are making millions of dollars a year. I'm pouring millions of dollars into a lifeline to get our company right and to protect people's money. It was like I said, it was me getting close to the investors, me having a close relationship with my team was my biggest fault.
So while all this is happening, no funds really, the development is not happening, there's frozen assets. Goliath is still taking in investors, still building and spending money. Like, we get to the middle of 2024, now what?
We're trying to polish things up. You know, middle 2024, I'm trying to polish the team. I'm investing into their development. I'm investing into the development still of our products.
How many investors do you have now, and how much money have they given you?
So I actually never knew the true number of investors. Again, I think the biggest misconception out there and the biggest thing is I was a showman. I was the face. You know, everyone wanted to be like Chris. Everyone wanted to meet Chris. Everyone wanted. People would say I had this aura around me that was just so fascinating and intriguing.
The same thing from middle school, from high school.
And so I was just there to have drinks and hang out with people, to fly, you know. Nick and the team would use it as more of a pressure point. Like, you know, one of our biggest hubs was in New York City. You know, so, you know, Nick had a big medical business out in Jersey and in New York City. And he started bringing in those investors. But if things didn't go Nick's way, you know, I'm going up there to have fun, go to a Yankee game or whatever. They're using it as like, Chris is on the jet right now and he's on his way and he's not happy. You know, it was like pressure tactics that they would use, you know. But like I said, I have never solicited a dime in my company. I had never sat at an investor dinner and say, this is why you should give me your money.
During that same time, how much did you take in?
I actually didn't take in any money. The company paid for my expenses. I had a salary, and my original salary was, I believe, 150 or 170. No, 250. Sorry, my original salary was $250,000 a year. And then, you know, I wanted to buy things. I wanted to buy a nicer car. I wanted to, look at different things that required financing. But I didn't make enough money on paper. Even though I had millions of dollars in my bank account, I didn't make enough on paper.
So the salaries now are being paid out of the money that you're bringing in from investors?
Yeah.
At any point, did someone say, hey, we probably shouldn't do that because the funds, like, what we're trying to build isn't working?
That was the problem. Every time every time I try to change something in Goliath, all the directors would come back and say, well, what's wrong with the company? Or why do I have to do that? For example, we started everyone in Orlando, and I'm talking to everyone, the who's who down to the nobodies, wanted to be a director in my company. These guys are making hand over fist cash. I've had one of the most prominent people in Orlando stop his company because he wanted to be a director in my company. It never happened, but because of that demand, we created like a broker fee. So you pay $5,000 as a director, you pay $5,000 once a month to the company, plus 20% of your commission back to the company. No different than a real estate broker. And that was the fee. Even implementing that, knowing that because we had big expenses coming up, I had a strategic meeting with my team and I showed them the expenses of our company. This was, I believe, in March of 25. We were at a burn rate of $3.5 million a month, just in operating expenses, salaries, office equipment, whatever it might be, corporate travel, whatever it is. We're about $3.5 million in a month burn rate. So I was showing them why the company was taking a 20% commission back.
Have you ever heard the saying plausible deniability?
Yeah.
What do you say to people who will see this and they'll say, this guy insulated himself and ignored all the signs so that he could have plausible deniability?
Again, you have to go back to intention. I built Goliath because it was changing people's lives and it was working. And we wanted to make sure that we can continue it. So we were building, we weren't just relying on the fund we were white labeling, we were building our own system. We were investing in other things. And I always communicated that. But as you're doing these things, you need people. You need people to come in either to protect you or to help rerun things. And so when we started growing, compliance became one of the big issues. So we hired a compliance firm. We hired compliance officers. And we showed them what we were doing. And we showed them the struggles we were having and where we needed to go. The problem is they were seeing the money and they were blinded by that.
Everybody was blinded by the money.
They were blinded by the money, and they knew if this thing fell, there's only one guy. And so they knew that it was a calculated risk. They knew if Goliath fell, whose face is everyone seeing? Chris's.
A compliance officer and an auditor never came to you and said, man, this is shady, this is sketchy, this is not going to work. What do you mean?
You're a bookkeeper and you make $3,500 a month at your job, in a normal corporate job. Or you go work for my company and making $25,000 a month and live a pretty cool lifestyle, have a pretty cool boss. We're kind of in the heat, in the midst of everything right now. But there was a time where I was the most adored person in Orlando. There was a time where people are calling me a strong pillar of this community. People are seeing my reach, not only into politics, but into schools and into charities and into how much I did for this community. I was adored. People wanted to work for that guy. And so they weren't paid to look the other way. They wanted to look the other way because they wanted to work for me. They wanted to be part. Like I said, we had people wanting to pause their companies to do very well in Orlando. Some people who live in my community wanted to be directors for my company.
Did you ever seek counsel from an attorney to say, like, hey, can you look at this?
We have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in counsel. Our agreement got kicked back, and they were like, we think you're selling us security. Not kicked back, sorry. In March of 25, 2 investors called and said the SEC reached out and they have questions about Goliath. And so we knew at some point the SEC was probably going to come looking.
Because you weren't registered.
Yeah. We weren't registered. A lot of people were talking.
None of these investors said, hey, are you registered?
Even when the bad media hit, they never questioned that. They just wanted an extra %, or they wanted an extra 0.5%, or they wanted to know if their commission was coming. That's why I'm saying, like, a lot of the company operated you would think that a lot of things would make logical sense. Yes, you get to over $200 million, you get to over 500 investors. You would think at some point someone would be like, they're seeing the Christmas parties. I mean, we threw a Christmas party in Orlando. We rented out the whole 4 seasons, the largest event that they've ever held, sorry. 700 people there. You would think one person would ask if we were registered with the SEC. They didn't care. On the second part, we always joked that in the contracts it could say thank you for funding the lifestyle, because no one read the contracts. I think out of the 1,200 contracts we ever sent out, 4 people had questions, 4 people had changes.
So the contract says you have a baseline of $100,000 that you have to give me. You got a baseline of $100,000 and 4 people had questions about this contract that guaranteed returns of 6, 8, 10%?
Yeah. And it wasn't even like crazy questions. One person didn't want to have mediation in Broward County, so they changed it to Orange. One person didn't like the termination clause, you know. It was like the weirdest picks, you know, of you should have used a comma here instead of and. Like, it was like the weirdest.
Nothing like, how are you guaranteeing me this?
But again, also too, I wasn't having these conversations. I don't know what was happening behind closed door. I was never a part of those conversations. And even when I've asked to join, to say, oh, you got a dinner tonight, I'll come by. No, there's no need. We don't want to bother you. We don't want to, you have a lot going on. And again, when things started unfolding and when things started coming to light, I now know why they didn't want me in those conversations. Because they were deal rooms.
What do you mean? Like the side deals that they made?
Yeah, so your question was no one questioned the contract. Well, because they're in the deal room. The smartest person who should have questioned the contracts were in the deal rooms.
So you're in March of 2025 and
the reason for that is we get notified that the SEC is doing an exploratory look. The exact words were a very private, the SEC told one of our investors, it's a very private exploratory look into Goliath. So no need to make any noise, no need to notify us.
why were they convinced that you weren't selling the security?
You know, it's a joint venture. You can cancel anytime. Your money's not locked up. We're not buying and holding crypto. There's a lot of things. You know, they're doing the Howey test, and the only part where we failed in the Howey test was we weren't allowing our investors to vote on things. Mm-hmm. That's where we decided to create the advisory council. So we would have people outside of Goliath who are investors advise the company, and they would basically be the voting party of the changes that would happen in the company. That was really the only kind of stress test. You want to be in a true joint venture partnership, then your investors need to vote in some manner.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did you feel more comfortable after that?
Felt untouchable. I felt untouchable because massive law firm just gave us the golden stamp of approval. We have compliance officers and a compliance company are reviewing everything. Our Dubai operations is finally off the ground and running. I just needed to figure out one piece.
Which was?
How do I cut commissions and how do I move money into our fund?
Did you ever figure it out?
Not till it was too late. You know, a lot of people don't know that Madoff didn't collapse because of 0809. Madoff collapsed because of his overhead. And when they brought in a mathematician, even though that they couldn't build the model that Madoff was using, because obviously the model didn't exist.
The model wasn't a model.
What they did come back with was his overhead.
He was paying people too much money. And he was paying too many people.
Welcome to Goliath Ventures. We are paying too much money to too many people. And the minute I tried to intervene and fix it, I was always halted. I was always pushed back against. And
But you were the CEO. I mean...
Yeah. Listen, there were times I had to take hard stances. There were times where I was like, I'm the CEO. I don't care. This is what we're doing. You're right. But again, getting too close to people, letting people in, seeing the impact on multiples of people, not just your team, but the reach that we had in our community, in our investment group, everywhere. and you try to make a change, now you have that force in of telling you no. So yes, there were things and times where I'm like, I don't really care what people say, this is the change. And then there were times where I should have just, what I should have done is, if we're still going by the playbook, not the logic playbook that you that you want to give in early 23, yes, listen, it would be a much different conversation sitting down with the authorities and saying, we had a vehicle, it froze, people lost money. We wouldn't really be liable for that, or have a very less liability, and moved on. But every year should have started at zero. Like every year we should have restructured everyone and just started everyone at zero. It would have allowed us to get back on track.
So like now we're in the summer, and I think at this point now you've given to many charities. Well, no, I want to back up, because at some point you sought counsel or maybe had a conversation with the very high profile attorney here in town. How and why did that start?
That actually started in mid-September of 25, right after my birthday. You know, the things were happening online, you know.
Wait, you mean 24?
No, 25. It was when I was seeking counsel.
I'm talking about Mark Nejame.
Oh, that. Mark came into my life at a very interesting time. Maybe 22. I think 22, yeah, was my first time going to Runway to Hope. We had friends, their kid had cancer, and we were supporting them. And, you know, we gave generously, you know, in what we could. I think it was like, maybe 10 grand or, you know, a couple grand we gave. 23 came by, and that's when the spending got bigger with me. That's when we were really engaged with Runway to Hope. We grew closer with our friends who, you know, child had cancer. And because the organization helped their kids so much and they were close friends of ours, we wanted to be part of that community. So after Runway to Hope in 2023, I told myself I'm going to get in contact with Mark. I want to be the title sponsor. I want to see their work and get involved more. And this is coming from a father who has 3 kids too, and I couldn't fathom fighting for their life. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to give as much as I could. January 2024, I'm getting ready for the gym. I'm at my house in Kings Point. And I look down, my phone's ringing, and it says Mark Nejame. And I'm like, perfect. I literally pick up the phone. I remember pick up the phone, I'm walking around my kitchen. And I'm like, hey, Mark. I'm like, I'm glad you called. I've actually been meaning to get in contact with you. And he goes, hey, Chris, I'm calling because I'm hearing rumors around town, and I think you're under investigation. And my heart sunk. what I found out was people weren't talking about my company. I was the new hot thing on the block. I was the one getting all the attention. All these guys that were it in Orlando were going to London House, and whether they're cheating on their wives or they were getting 2 or 3, 4 other girlfriends, whatever they were doing, they were no longer the star. I was young, I was single, I'm attractive, charismatic, I'm wealthy. And the girls are closer to my age than they are to these guys.
So now you're somewhere in the summer, early fall, you find out you're under investigation for sure.
Yeah, we had a great summer. We had a great Labor Day. I went to Montauk with some friends. My first time there. Some close friends. And I come back on the 2nd of September because my kids had something on the 3rd. And I woke up September 3rd with 100 text messages. And it was the first article written about me and my company. So I didn't think anything about that. My heart sunk a little bit, and really, it's the Windermere people or the Orlando people talking. And it was such a fixation on my lifestyle, and such a fixation on, at the time I had hired someone in Orlando to do interior design for my homes. And it was a fixation on her lifestyle. And so I was just like, it's just a hit piece, no one knows who this person is. And even now, the person who writes all these articles gets 30 views on their channels. Mm-hmm. The problem is I didn't know that there was an arm in Orlando that would spread it like wildfire. I had no idea that along this whole process I had created these enemies. Again, this is someone who, I guess my involvement in all the charities and the community, I'm just trying to grow relationships, and I'm just trying to, really just grow my relationships within the city. But I'm getting close to people without going through the gatekeeper. And that's what pissed people off, is that I'm getting close to certain families without kissing the ring of another family. And I didn't know that there was this game. I didn't know that that's how these communities operated. I'm going to a dinner and I meet this person. One of the individuals early on in our company, he graduated from UCF. He's, big there. He's trying to get close to one of the big benefactors, one of the big people that write checks to that school. That person was invested in my company. That person has invited me to their house to have cocktails. I think it's a good idea because I see it on Instagram. I reach out to him. I'm like, oh, how do you know this person? He's like, oh, I don't. I've been trying to get to know them. They're like a legend here at UCF. I was like, oh, anytime you need an intro or you want to go have a drink with them, you let me know. He's a really good friend of mine. I, in my mind, think I'm doing something good. I didn't know I was overshadowing them and pissed them off.
Since the overshadowing is, and like, I guess you wouldn't know that because, to go back to the beginning, you grew up poor. You don't know how wealth really operates. You're kind of learning it on the job. At what point did you decide you needed the nice house, you needed the cars, you needed the Rolex, you needed all these fancy things? At what point did you decide that? And did you ever come to a realization that I'm using other people's money to buy these things because the money's still frozen, project's not off the ground?
I think I didn't use that logic because it was the same people telling me that I needed to have those things. You know, I was flying commercial. I was happy. I was driving I bought a Corvette outside of Goliath, and then I traded in for a Porsche. I drive it to a lunch. One of the investors comments, "Nice mom car." You know?
That's a mom car, huh?
I guess a Porsche.
Maybe in Isleworth it is.
Yeah, you know, a GTS Panamera is a sports mom car. I didn't know that. It's a Porsche. I didn't buy these things until comments were made, and then I was understanding the game, you know. Why don't you drive a Rolls Royce? So I buy a Rolls Royce. You own a Rolls Royce, but you don't own a Rolex? Okay, well, let me go buy a Rolex. I bought a Rolex with diamonds. Oh, you don't buy a Rolex with diamonds. You buy a regular presidential, no diamonds. Maybe, you know, diamond clock, but each like social circle had a different rules of engagement. I was at a charity event in 24. I thought I was doing good. I went toe to toe with the big Ellsworth person and beat him. And you're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I thought we were in a friendly bidding war. I thought it was, you know, for me, it was an ego. For me, it was, we're in a bidding war, we're having fun, and we're doing it for a great cause. And whoever's willing to stick their neck out the more is the winner. Well, I guess I embarrassed this person in front of all of Ellsworth and all of Windermere and all of the who's who and a couple big family names that were there, and created an enemy. But you're right. I don't know how wealth moves. I don't come from a trust fund. My dad didn't run a Fortune 50 company. You know, my parents weren't millionaires. So I didn't know how money talked in silence. And these were the biggest learning experiences, that you don't let money talk by the watch or by the car. True wealth. It's by the look, by the tailored suit, by the subtleness of your shoes, by how you talk, even down to what you order. You know, I used to drink vodka cranberries or vodka pineapple, Malibu sunrises, margaritas. True wealth, vodka on the rocks or club soda, Vesper martini, dirty, extra dirty. You build a level to, you're talking and dancing with someone in a silent language, and you never outshine the master. And that's what I learned at this charity event that I was at. I outshined the master. I didn't know that he was the guy known at this event. He was, and everyone thought Runway to Hope was my show. Everyone was like, you don't go to Runway to Hope and you don't bet against Delgado. So they were in silence giving me my show. But the problem is, word got around, like, we need to invite this guy to our events because he likes to have fun. He likes to bid. He likes to challenge the wealthy in front of people and in some cases embarrass them. Now the events and charities, they love this. They're raising more money for great causes. But I guess I didn't realize the damage I was doing.
You force people to give more money. Do you believe that?
Mm-hmm. Every charity has now broken records, has now raised more money. Because they didn't want to lose to the crypto guy. You know, we're sitting there and we're deal making. I'm going to let you win, but you have to buy it at 50,000. You're going to let me win, but I'm going to buy it at 60. We were at a charity event. Their biggest prize package, I think, went for $17,000 the previous year. Mm-hmm. I go there and it sells for $60,000. They were terrified that I was going to bid on it. They started doing, instead of doing the raising the paddles, buy it now before Delgado starts bidding. Because I would be at the bar grabbing a drink, or I would be in the bathroom. It became a game in Windermere. It became a game. Like, you're going to get it on a 30% discount because Delgado's in the bathroom right now. So before he walks in, just, you know. So yes, I do believe that I force these people to invest more in their community. This community has given everyone everything that they can ever ask for. And the least you can do is support it. And listen, $100,000 doesn't mean to people that live in $10 million homes. Give them the $10,000. You're saving kids' lives. Everyone in the person, or 95% of those people in that room, have kids. I couldn't wake up one day as a parent knowing my kid has stage 3, stage 4 cancer, and I don't got the funds to fight for my own kid. But you're here sitting on your high horse in your castle and knowing $10,000 is life or death for this kid. And you can't even do that? What did this world do to you? What wrong did this world do to you where you can't have some compassion for the same community that's going to praise you? That's why this community is just a cesspool of just, if I didn't step up and I didn't step in, because they're all scared to challenge each other. Because they're all scared of what's happening to me is going to happen to them. You think I'm the only one in Ellsworth that's accused of doing something wrong? You don't think there's dirt on half these people that live here? They all think money laundering is a way to save taxes. I have a criminal complaint of money laundering. I had to have it explained to me what exactly that was. Again, because intention. I didn't go into this intent with operating an alleged Ponzi scheme. These people that won't even help the community have intent of doing what they're doing and knowing they're doing it. The problem is they're all doing it together.
Chris, this is a movie. At any point, did you ever sit and say, like, man, I am donating to charities, I am buying another house, another car, another watch, and like all of this is not my money? Like, did you ever feel bad about that?
It wasn't that thought process because we were building something and we were almost there. We just had to change the internal structure. And you know, I only bought a house for my kids because I had just bought in Andy an Escalade, and it got stolen out of her front yard in Apopka. Not only did it get stolen, but my kid was taking out the trash. And 2 minutes after he dumped the trash on the sidewalk and walked back and closed the garage, someone jumped in the car and stole her car, which means they're watching my kid take the trash out. My kid could have been kidnapped. So I wasn't buying a house to buy a house to have another multi-million-dollar house. I was moving them into a safer community. I was protecting my family. Everything that I did, like I said, there was greed for necessity, and then there was greed for greed. But I didn't operate 90% on greed for greed. I was operating greed and necessity because people were positioning me and saying, you need to do this, you need to have this, you need to operate this way, you need to go here and do this and do that. It would make me more comfortable if you vacationed in Montauk. It'd make me more comfortable if you took out a yacht, it's 200 feet. So it's like you're kind of, it's a double-edged sword. You know, people have a image of what a successful, fun CEO looks like. You know, maybe Hollywood has ruined that. They look at Jordan Belfort and, you know, and they look at Bernie Madoff and they look at all these massive wealthy people that had the houses and the cars and so they, in their mind, they think, you know, I gotta ask, why don't you fly private? I'm flying commercial. You know, and I would fly private on occasion, but it was really just to make it back for my kids, you know, baseball or soccer game, or it was an emergency, you know. But, you know, I'd go to Dubai, I'd fly business class or first class. I'd travel domestically, commercially. But then you meet people and they're like, why aren't you flying private? I thought you were successful. I thought you did all this stuff, you know. So you kind of become, it's a product of something. I forget how they name it.
Product of your success.
Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about your family. How do you feel going through this, knowing that, I mean, you've got 3 kids out here.
I think that's the hardest part, you know. I didn't have the pressure of high school like my kids have, or like kids today, you know. social media wasn't, we had MySpace when I was in high school, and phones didn't really have internet, so you couldn't check really anything at school. You'd have to go home and log on your computer and,
Dial up.
I would make a comment to a cute girl at school, and then I would have to go home to see if she sent me a message on MySpace. So you don't have I didn't have the pressure that they have today, on top of your dad being a cornerstone of the community, on top of everyone knows your family is very wealthy. To then have that all collapse, and having your dad, probably the most famous person in Central Florida. It's a lot, and I feel for them. That's why my only priority has been to spend as much time as I can with them, to be with them, to have open communication with them, so they know that they're not going through this alone. And like I said, we are very involved in a lot of schools. We are very involved in a lot of sporting activities. So a lot of the families, a lot of the kids are grateful because of those opportunities. So it has made life easier for my kids. Even though their dad has this dark cloud around him, they still kind of see the light and still thankful that someone stepped up and helped their school out, whether it's for uniforms or scoreboards or whatever it might be. So they're still grateful for my family.
What do you fear most?
I fear missing them grow up. I fear not being there for their graduation. I fear that my daughter's not going to have a strong man in her life to help her when she wants to date, and to protect her. I have always been there for my kids. And I don't know what it's like to not be there for them. And they know that. They know I could be on the other side of the world, and if it's important, I will be here. And they can count on that. And they always have. So the possibility of missing their graduations or their first girlfriends or their prom nights, I don't know if my kids are going to get married young like I did. Missing that, knowing that they can't count on their father, kills me. I didn't know you'd make me cry.
But that's real. Your family's important to you.
My family has always been my center. They want to say a lot of things online about me. Did I have a lot of girlfriends? Yeah. I got out of a very long marriage. I was with my wife at 17. I was married at 19. It's a very long relationship. I got out. I didn't know how to date. I hadn't been dating in, 20 years, whatever, 15 years. So yeah, you date a lot of people. But you could go to every single one of those persons that had a relationship with me My kids were, I didn't care what they had going on. I didn't care what the person I was dating had going on. If my kids had something, I was there. If I was on the other side of the world and they needed me there and they wanted me there, I would be there without any excuse. You know, I'm flying 17 hours back from Dubai to make my son's baseball game. Like, they are the absolute world.
Is that why you are cooperating with the government?
There's a lot more to this story. There's a lot more of involvement of other people. And there is a lot of people trying to take me down without me even knowing that we're inside my company. And so I want them to see everything. I want them to know the truth. I was complimented on the first time I ever sat down with the DOJ on my candor and my cooperation. Because there's more to this than just Chris Delgado. My intention was always to right a wrong and to make sure that this thing would be fully operational. And so everyone, I think it's important that everyone sees the whole picture. And everyone understands that, yes, I had the cars and the watches and the jewelry and I flew private and I had this life. But that was never the goal and the intention. I had this life and I did those things because of the people that pushed me to do those things. And I'm not playing victim, I'm not. But I never had a Rolls Royce on my mind. I never had a Rolex on my mind. I never had these things on my mind until they were brought to my attention by our investors. Until they were concerned. They weren't concerned about the contract. They were concerned if I had a watch or not. I can't speak for others. But I needed them to see everything. And I needed them to see my intention. What is really important to me. And yes, it could have been easy to stay in Dubai and fight it from Dubai. But I was never someone who ran away from challenges or from trials or tribulations. I always faced them head on. And if my family was going to get dragged in this, which they have, then I wanted my kids to see that their father was on the front line, fighting for them, and not a coward running. So I came here on my own terms. I self-surrendered my passport. I self-turned myself in. I was never arrested. I didn't have agents kicking down my door. No one raided my house. I self-surrendered. Went before the judge on my terms. Also, my kids can see that their dad isn't a coward. That he's going to fight for things that matter to him. And my kids are my world. And I will fight for them.
Why do you think the DOJ isn't looking at other people, or do you think they are?
I think some very powerful people who started this investigation just had their hindsights on me. And maybe the goal was just to focus on me. And maybe they didn't think that maybe they thought that I would flee. So their only goal was to take down Chris. But that's why I want my story told. Someone who had taken $3.5 million from my company, I thought was enough. I thought I had paid him enough money, $3.5 million cash. I've had messages saying, I have given you this money. When's enough enough? And there's always an excuse, always this. I wanted this, I was promised this. We weren't promised anything. So I think the crosshair was put on my back. Where this goes from here, where this goes in the future. But I think everyone needs to know the full picture. I think everyone needs to know my position. I think everyone needs to know how much I tried to protect the operation, how I tried to change things, how I was held not to change things, how I hired people to make things right. I was doing the best I could to build something that I saw had true impact. I didn't know I had people in my camp trying to take me down.
Well, I think this is good for today.